You're done here. 15 years, wrapped up. He said it the way someone announces a delayed flight, bored, rehearsed, already mentally elsewhere. No handshake, no chair pulled out, just a freshly pressed suit standing in my doorway like the building had issued him confidence along with his badge. This was his first week as CFO. First week, and he was already amputating history like dead weight. I took exactly 3 seconds to look him over. The watch too expensive for someone who hadn't survived a single budget freeze. The tie still holding its factory crease like a receipt for inexperience. The posture of a man who thought authority was a personality trait. I smiled, calm, polite, dangerous. "Good luck with the quarter," I said, and watched his eyebrows twitch. That wasn't the reaction he'd rehearsed for. He wanted resistance, tears, negotiation. Instead, I reached for my coffee mug, the chipped black one that said, "Try harder," slid it into a banker's box, and stood. He cleared his throat. "Security will escort you," as if I might suddenly steal a stapler after a decade and a half of keeping the financial spine of this place upright. "Sure," I said, "just let me log out." I didn't. I didn't need to. Everything that mattered had been encrypted, scheduled, sandboxed, and sealed long before he learned where the bathrooms were. I walked out past interns glued to their phones, past payroll pretending not to see me, past a man from accounting who mouthed, "He has no idea." He was right. He had no idea. No exit interview. No goodbye email. Just the soft clink of my badge hitting the HR desk and the smell of old carpet and career panic hanging in the air. 15 years. Late nights, cold dinners, systems duct taped together with logic and paranoia. Performance reviews that called me quiet, like it was a compliment. Quiet, in corporate language, just means you're invisible until something breaks. And everything they relied on was about to break. Because the forecasting platform they used to make 9-figure decisions wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a living system. Scripts I wrote, models I tuned, dependencies no one else understood because no one ever asked. They just asked if it worked. And now the man with the shiny watch had decided to swing an axe without checking the roots. I didn't leave angry. I left precise. I left them a silence. And that silence was already counting down. The security guard downstairs didn't do the whole, "please follow me" routine. He just stood near the glass doors like he'd been assigned to escort a ghost. "You okay?" he asked, voice low, like he didn't want the building to hear. "Perfect," I said, shifting the box against my hip. He nodded once. The kind of nod men give when they know something stupid is happening, but their paycheck isn't big enough to stop it. The doors hissed open, and the outside world slapped me with sunlight, traffic, and a woman screaming into her phone over a parking spot. Life kept moving. No dramatic music, no slow-motion revenge walk. Just me crossing the lot after 15 years of being the uncredited engine behind every record quarter email the executives love to forward. I drove home and didn't turn on the radio. Didn't need noise. The quiet was loud enough. By the time I reached my driveway, my phone had already buzzed twice with internal notifications I hadn't bothered to disable because I didn't need to. The system would tell me what was happening. It always did. I set the box down in my living room, kicked off my shoes, and opened my personal laptop like I was checking the weather. Not email, not LinkedIn. Logs. The forecasting platform had a health dashboard, because of course it did. You don't build a machine that decides hiring, inventory, pricing, and acquisition timing without building a heartbeat monitor. At 2:17 p.m., there it was. Access attempt detected. User, CFO-NEW. Result, permission denied. Second attempt, denied. Third attempt, denied. Then the polite little line I'd added years ago after the 2019 fraud scare. Recalibration requires primary architect validation. Biometric confirmation required. The countdown timer was already running in the corner like a quiet bomb. 47 hours, 38 minutes until self-lock. People hear self-lock and imagine sabotage. It wasn't. It was protocol. My protocol. Stale models kill companies. Bad forecasts kill careers. So I built safeguards. If no valid credential activity from the primary architect occurred within a set window, the system sealed the core model to prevent contaminated adjustments. It forced a recalibration, a hand on the wheel. My hand. I leaned back, cracked a soda, and watched the attempt stack up like a toddler hitting an elevator button. Somewhere in that glass tower, the new CFO was likely smiling at his own reflection. convinced he could streamline anything with enough buzzwords. He didn't ask for a handoff, didn't request admin elevation, didn't schedule a transition meeting. He just printed a termination notice and assumed the machine would keep running without the person who built it. That's what men like him always think, that competence is transferable through a title, that a system is just a tool, not a creature with teeth. On Monday, he sent a company-wide email, excited to present my first quarterly update. Expect cleaner insights, modern delivery, raised standards. Raised standards. He hadn't even found the ladder. And deep in the server room, the model was already tightening its grip, waiting for the one thing it was designed to demand: me. By Sunday night, the system started whispering, not screaming yet, just enough to make itself known to anyone paying attention. 2 automated alerts fired within 6 hours. Anomalous credential behavior and unauthorized parameter access. They weren't red flags, more like raised eyebrows. The kind you get before a building inspector shuts down a construction site. Someone in finance opened a ticket, tagged it minor, and escalated it to Tier 2. An hour later, it was closed. No comment, no resolution notes, just a digital shrug. I could picture it perfectly. The new CFO, sleeves rolled up for effect, talking about legacy clutter and technical debt, like he'd discovered those phrases on a podcast during his commute. Meanwhile, the platform wasn't degrading. It was protecting itself. Monday morning, I made coffee and watched the logs roll in like a slow tide. 8:11 a.m. Access attempt from Finance Analytics. Denied. 8:24 a.m. Admin override request. Denied. The subtext was getting louder. The language changed. Unexpected formula behavior. Dependency mismatch. Recalibration required. By noon, someone finally noticed the name stamped on the core model. Not a title, a name. Mine. A message popped up in an internal thread that still synced to my redundancy archive. Why does the forecast engine say it belongs to Rowan Hale? No answer. Another message, different channel. Anyone know how to unlock the main model? Dashboards are acting weird. Replies came back cautious, vague, terrified. Probably permissions. IT's looking at it. Let's not overreact. That's corporate code for panic postponed. Tuesday, the cracks became visible. The CFO called a quick sync to review trends. Except the trends weren't trending. The interface loaded a static chart from 2 quarters ago, froze, then dumped him back to the login screen like a bouncer with a memory. A junior analyst raised a hand, voice shaking. Some of the formulas aren't updating. He smiled the way men smile when their car starts making a noise they don't recognize. Legacy issue. We'll streamline it. Streamline. There it was again. He didn't call me, didn't text, didn't even ask HR if I was alive. He just kept pushing forward, convinced momentum could substitute for understanding. Wednesday morning, he pasted projections from an old deck into a new presentation and hoped no one would notice. The system tried one last time to be helpful. A bright, unfriendly banner appeared during another override attempt. Contact authorized architect for recalibration protocol. There were only 2 authorized architects. One retired 3 years ago. The other was me, sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through the access log and watching the timer dip under 36 hours. Slack was buzzing now. Marketing asking finance. Finance asking IT. IT asking legal. Do we have his number? Did anyone schedule a transition? Why wasn't this flagged? Questions stacking up with nowhere to land. And still, silence from the top. No call, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just a man with a shiny watch walking blind through a minefield, tapping his foot, confident the ground would hold. I closed my laptop and went for a walk. Not to escape, to enjoy the calm before the machine stopped turning. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that only exists right before something expensive breaks. At 7:41 a.m., the executive floor was already humming. Assistants moving too fast, phones pressed too close to ears, coffee untouched because no one had time to taste it. In the glass-walled conference room, the new CFO stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, rehearsing confidence like it was a language he'd memorized phonetically. The quarterly board review was less than an hour away. This was supposed to be his coronation. He tapped the screen. Once. Twice. The projector blinked, then stalled. A loading wheel spun like it was buying time. Then the screen went black. Red text surfaced, centered and unapologetic. Access denied. Authorized architect required. The temperature in the room dropped hard. "That's not right," he muttered, tapping again like aggression might intimidate software. His assistant leaned in. "Is it supposed to say a name under that?" It did. Mine. He stood up too fast, chair scraping loud enough to turn heads. "Get it. Now." 6 floors below, IT had already seen it. They'd seen the attempt stack up all morning like a bad joke. Rachel, the senior systems manager I'd trained years ago, stared at her monitor and exhaled through her nose. "It's sealed," she said. "Encryption's clean, no back door." Someone suggested a wipe. Rachel shook her head. "That would nuke 12 years of behavioral waiting. We'd lose the model's memory." Translation: they'd be flying blind. Back upstairs, executives began arriving early, sensing blood in the air. The CFO forced a smile. "Minor glitch," he said. "Legacy permissions." Legacy. Again. He flipped to a backup deck built on guesses and recycled buzzwords, muting his phone every time it buzzed with another failed override. At my house, I sat on the porch with coffee, laptop open, watching the log stream tick like a metronome. 742, unauthorized credential. 744, biometric mismatch. 747, admin override blocked. Each denial stamped clean with timestamps and device IDs. Only one thing was visible to them on those screens: my name. Not a threat, not a message, just ownership. Someone finally asked the question out loud. "Who built this system?" Silence. The CFO's jaw tightened. "We're handling it," he said. Handling it. The board meeting clock kept moving. 45 minutes, then 30, and still no call, no humility. No understanding that the machine they'd depended on for years had stopped, not because it was broken, but because the hand on the lever was gone. By 9:03 a.m., the boardroom smelled like leather, cold coffee, and the specific fear that only shows up when rich people realize their numbers might be fiction. The meeting had officially started. Donuts untouched, screens still bleeding red. "Where are the projections?" Franklin asked, voice rough, ancient. The kind of man who'd watched recessions come and go like seasons. "We're sitting on 3 acquisitions, and I need real numbers." The CFO chuckled, thin and brittle. "Short-term tech issue. Legacy forecasting tool. I'll walk you through provisional data." He clicked. A bar chart appeared that looked like it had been assembled in a moving car. No context, no waiting, just optimism dressed as math. "This isn't the model," someone said, flat, not curious, accusatory. "No," he admitted. "The primary file is temporarily inaccessible." A remote board member zoomed the shared screen. "Why does it list Rowan Hale as the authorized architect?" Silence fell like a dropped plate. The CFO swallowed. "He built an early version. We're in the process of updating security." Updating. Cute. From my kitchen, I stirred oatmeal and watched the shadow node log light up again. Another override attempt. Another denial. Another polite stamp of my name. The CFO's phone activity lit up next. Calls to operations, supply chain, HR. Mid-level managers fishing for a number they pretended not to need. Texts followed. "Hope you're well. Quick question. Any chance you can reach Rowan?" Totally informal. Bottleneck. That's what they called it. A bottleneck. Meanwhile, the CEO leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You're telling us," he said slowly, "that our entire predictive infrastructure is offline, because the only person with authority was terminated without transition." The CFO hesitated. "It was an oversight." "And legal?" another board member asked. "Were they consulted?" The CFO didn't answer fast enough. Phones began vibrating around the table. Whispered side conversations sparked and spread. "Do we even have his number? Who approved this? Why wasn't this escalated?" I set my bowl in the sink and started a puzzle on the counter, the kind with 1,000 tiny pieces and a picture of the ocean. No rush. Control isn't loud, it's patient. At 10:31 a.m., the CEO's phone buzzed. He read one line, stood without a word, and walked out. The room watched him go. Someone near the end of the table whispered it like a verdict. He fired the wrong person. In his office, the CEO didn't shout or throw anything. He stood at the window, hands in his pockets, watching a landscaping crew carve decorative trenches into perfectly useless grass, while his company's forecasting backbone lay buried under arrogance. He dialed IT directly. "Who can unlock the model?" Silence on the other end stretched just long enough to be honest. "One profile," the director said. "Primary architect, biometric bound, no secondary clearance." "And that is?" The answer came quieter. "Rowan Hale." The CEO closed his eyes for half a second. "Any workarounds?" "We tried a sandboxed override. It corrupted the simulation layer. We had to roll it back. If we push harder, we lose historical weighting. We'd be guessing." Guessing. With 9 figures on the line. He ended the call and pulled up my employee file. Quiet, reliable, tends to hoard responsibilities. Recommend delegation training. Below it, the CFO's termination approval, time-stamped 4 days earlier. He stared at it like it might apologize. My phone started buzzing in earnest now. LinkedIn pings. Old colleagues rediscovering my existence. "Hope you're well. Thinking of you." Greg from accounting sent a dumpster fire gif. "Boardroom's a crime scene," he wrote. I smiled and muted the thread. Then the call came. Private number. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence is leverage. When I answered, the CEO didn't waste time. "Rowan," he said, voice controlled but tired. "Protocol isn't working." "No," I said calmly. "It's working exactly as designed." A pause. "We can see your name. That's all we can see. That's intentional." He exhaled. "What do you want?" There it was, the shift, from command to request. "That depends," I said. "Do you want a temporary patch or a permanent fix?" Silence again. This one heavier, calculating. "I'm listening." I stood, walked to the window, watched a man struggle to parallel park. "No intermediaries," I said. "Full reinstatement, same authority, direct line to you. No CFO in my chain." He didn't argue. "Compensation reflects value," I added, "not market averages." Another pause. Then, "Agreed." I smiled, not at victory, but at precision. "I'll be there in the morning." I hung up before gratitude could cheapen it. I didn't rush the next morning. Power doesn't sprint. It arrives exactly when it means to. I wore a dark sweater, no tie, nothing that said spectacle, just enough to remind them I hadn't come back to beg. The lobby froze when I walked in. The receptionist blinked like she was watching a glitch resolve in real time. "Can I help you?" she asked, already knowing she couldn't. "You can," I said pleasantly. "Let them know I've arrived." The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. When the doors opened, the hallway buzzed like a shaken hive. Assistants whispering, phones lighting up. A few people stopped pretending not to look. When I stepped into the boardroom, the tension snapped. The CFO sat at the far end, pale, hands clenched around a legal pad he hadn't written on once. He didn't look at me. The CEO stood. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, set my laptop down, and opened it without ceremony. "I'll be brief," I said. The system didn't fail. It executed protocol. The projector lit up. Diagrams unfolded clean and precise. This platform ingests 12 data streams, weights them against historical performance, and recalibrates against external volatility. After the 2019 breach, I was asked to ensure it could not be tampered with again. A murmur rippled. So I bound the core to biometric authentication. One architect, one hand on the wheel. I pulled up the audit log. Failed attempts, device IDs, timestamps, the red banner they'd all memorized by now. "You removed that hand," I said calmly. "Without transition, without authorization. This wasn't sabotage, it was negligence." Someone asked the question no one wanted to answer. Who approved his termination? All eyes swung. The CFO swallowed. It was part of a restructuring. It was not, the CEO said sharply. Silence swallowed the room. The CFO stood, started to speak, then stopped when legal entered with an envelope. He walked out smaller than he'd arrived. I closed my laptop. "Now," I said, "shall we restore access?" Every head nodded. The room didn't exhale until the door clicked shut behind him. Even then, no one moved. Power shifts don't make noise. They change gravity. The CEO gestured for me to continue, suddenly aware that the most important person in the room wasn't sitting at the head of the table anymore. I reopened my laptop, fingers steady, no rush. Restoration isn't a button, I said. It's a process. The screen filled with live telemetry, pipelines reconnecting, validation checks running, historical weights rehydrating like memory returning to a body. The board leaned forward as if proximity might speed it up. You're watching 12 years of behavioral data reintegrate, I added. Any shortcut here would poison the model for months. No one interrupted. They'd learned. A minute passed, then another. A soft chime sounded. The dashboard shifted from red to blue, clean, stable, alive. Revenue curves corrected themselves. Risk bands tightened. The future snapped back into focus. A collective breath swept the room. The CEO closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with something like respect. "We need to formalize this," he said, immediately. "Already drafted," I replied, sliding a document across the table. "Direct reporting line, title authority, documentation mandate, succession training on my timeline, a performance clause tied to outcomes, not optics." No one haggled. Legal nodded. Finance nodded. Even the board member who'd been skeptical of everything nodded. When you bring the machine back from the dead, people stop arguing over font size. The CEO looked at me. "Anything else?" I considered it. Thought about 15 years of being invisible. "One thing," I said. "This system doesn't belong to an org chart. It belongs to continuity. Fire based on ignorance again, and it will protect itself again." He didn't flinch. "Understood." The meeting adjourned without applause. No victory lap, just quiet recalibration. As people filed out, a few paused to thank me. Not loudly. Respect is quieter than regret. I stayed seated until the room emptied, then shut my laptop and stood. The chair at the head of the table was still warm. I didn't take it. Not yet. Power isn't about where you sit. It's about whether the room waits when you speak. And this one already did. By the afternoon, the building felt different. Not celebratory. Cautious. Like a place that had just survived a structural failure and was afraid to lean too hard on anything. Emails went out correcting narratives. Strategic realignment. Leadership update. Continuity assurance. Corporate incense burned thick to cover the smell of panic. I ignored most of it. My work wasn't in the inbox. It was in the machine. I spent the next few hours walking teams through reality. Not the glossy version, the real one. Finance first, then operations, then supply chain. I showed them where the assumptions lived, where the risk lived, and why you never treat a forecasting system like a slideshow generator. They listened, took notes, asked real questions. Fear is an excellent teacher. The CEO stopped by once, stood in the doorway, watched for a minute without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded. "You're staying late?" "Probably," I said. He smiled thinly. "Good. We need the Q4 picture locked." He hesitated. "And Rowan, you were right. I didn't ask about what." He didn't need to say it. The CFO's office was already being emptied. Glass walls stripped bare. A name removed from the directory before the chair cooled. That's how fast relevance evaporates when authority outruns competence. Later, I sat alone in the boardroom, lights dimmed, dashboards humming softly on standby. I pulled up the audit trail one last time. Every failed attempt, every ignored warning, every decision that led them here. I archived it, not as a trophy, as insurance. Power isn't just leverage, it's memory. When people forget how close they came to losing control, they get careless again. Outside, the city settled into evening. Somewhere, a former CFO was explaining to his family that restructuring cuts both ways. Somewhere else, a junior analyst slept better knowing the numbers made sense again. I shut the system down properly this time. Biometric confirmed, recalibration complete. The machine rested. As I left the building, no one stopped me. No escort, no glances. Just the quiet acknowledgement that things worked again because I was there. 15 years ago, I'd been hired as a support function, a quiet asset. Now the company knew the difference between support and survival. And tomorrow, when the quarterly reports went out, my name wouldn't be on the slide. It would be everywhere else, in every decision that didn't explode. The funny thing about endings is that they never feel like endings when you're inside them. There was no announcement, no standing ovation, no email declaring balance restored to the universe. The quarterly report went out on time, clean, confident, numbers that held up under scrutiny. The board approved the acquisitions. Hiring plans resumed, supply orders realigned. From the outside, it looked like nothing had happened. That's how real control works, invisible when it's done right. A week later, my new contract was finalized. Title didn't matter, but it was there. Authority was explicit, documentation timelines respected, a successor program approved and funded, not because someone suddenly believed in redundancy, but because they'd felt the cost of ignoring it. The CEO kept his word. Direct line, no interference, no noise. I went back to my office. Same floor, different gravity. The mug returned to the desk. The origami crane sat by the monitor. Systems stabilized. People stopped whispering. Occasionally, someone would pause in my doorway, ask a question carefully, like they were approaching a live wire with respect. I answered, not to prove a point, to keep the machine healthy. Somewhere down the line, someone will forget this lesson. They always do. They'll mistake confidence for competence again. They'll think titles run systems. When that happens, the protocols will still be there, quiet, patient, waiting. I didn't win by shouting. I didn't burn anything down. I just let the absence speak until the truth became too loud to ignore. They tried to erase me. Instead, they learned exactly what breaks when you do. So if there's a takeaway, it's this. In every organization, there's a difference between the people you see and the people who make the future arrive on time. Know which one you are. And if you ever think about firing the second type without understanding what they hold together, remember this story. Because power doesn't always sit in the corner office. Sometimes it walks out quietly, waits, and lets the world come knocking.